10, 9, 8. Go for main engine start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, hello again, MouseWorks fans. I'm here for another rocket build, so let's get straight into it. The one I'm going to be building is the Estes Mean Machine. Many of you had this when you were young, if you haven't just started in rockets. And it's a 6 foot tall rocket. That was the neatest thing about it. So they're still making it. They have a little different paint job. It used to be all black. That was what was so cool, 6 foot black rocket. So let's get into this and start the build. Okay, as always, we're gonna go ahead and see what's in the bag. So let's cut it open and see what we've got to deal with. All right. So we've got the main tubes, and there is a whole bunch of those. There is the couplers, which are actually they give you ones that are disconnectable. That way you can take the rocket apart and not have to jam it all the way in your car to transport it, which is really nice. The original didn't have that, so you had to choose how you were transporting a rocket. Got the nose cone. All right, got the engine tube. The bag of parts will open here in a sec. Okay. So let's see what else we got here in the bag. All right, so we've got a engine spacer for the D and E engines. So if you want to use a D, you can still do that, or if you want to use an E. There's a ring for the engine retainer. The engine spacers to go inside the tube. A parachute. One thing that I noticed is they put the dates on the manufacturer on a lot of these, mainly for the warranty, I believe, but kind of interesting they put the dates on that. Some safety warnings there. Oh, I'm sorry, the 1-year warranty, and a advertisement for the National Rocketry Association, which is a good thing to do. Engine hook. So they're using the old engine hook that they're not using that screw-on type that they're doing with their new models. It's just too bad. Engine block. That's to keep the engine from going too far in the rocket. And a shock cord mount, which is nice that this is separate instead of being part of the instructions, because generally when they print it on the opposite side of something that you need to look at on the construction, and you cut it out and you no longer have that. So having that separate is nice, plus it's a little heavier duty. And shock cord, which I will replace with a nylon shock cord. This is just rubber, has a tendency to break. And the launch lug, which you probably have to cut that into 2. Okay, let's see what's in the other bag here. We've got the fins, which are quite small for the size of a rocket, but it always works. I mean, this thing's been in production probably for a good 50 years now. These are laser cut, which is nice. So a lot easier to work with than the old die cut. And then we got some decals here. And these look like actual water slide decals. They're not stickers. And got the word Mean Machine there, and little viper mouth or whatever it is. Big old sheet for a big old rocket. Okay, let's take a look at the instructions here. Looks like first page is just identifying all the parts, and they do have the stock numbers. So if you need a part, you can actually get that from Estes using those stock numbers. First page is the fin alignment guide that you cut out and tape onto the rocket. They tell you to sand the balsa, straighten the balsa. Engine mount tube is pretty straightforward. Installing the engine mount tube and then putting on the adapters to go from one tube to the next, and sighting down the making sure everything's smooth, because you do want the rocket tubes to be completely straight, as straight as possible to make a good flight. And putting on the launch lug, it does look like you cut it in two. There's the adapter coupler that is separable there. And they talk about finishing the rocket and then putting in the parachute and wadding and loading an engine and getting it ready to fly. So looks good, looks pretty straightforward, so let's get right into it. Okay, so the first step is to cut out the fin alignment guide, and I'll just make sure there's nothing important on the other side. Talks about on the other side about what tools and so forth you need. Which is a handy thing to have. You're just getting into rocketry, getting the right types of glue and so forth as well. So, okay, you can see that all there. Scissors, pencil, ruler, sandpaper, carpenter's glue, plastic, cement, hobby knife, masking tape, primer, paint, and clear coat. Clear coat's good to keep the decals on. Okay. Cut this nice and close. And whenever you use one of these, you want to make sure that it's pretty straight. You can get these crooked, and then that'll make the fins crooked, of course, and you don't want that because then your flight's not going to be very good. There is a couple of tools I'm going to use to make sure everything's straight. And cut straight, that'd be nice. Okay. Alrighty. So what we're going to do is we are going to tape this around one of the tubes, like so. Get it lined up pretty exacting, as best you can, as tight as you can. That way everything lines up good. You can see they give you little tick marks to make sure everything's together smooth. So we'll put a couple pieces of tape on there. Okay, now we're ready to mark the fin lines. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is they tell you to measure, to put this sleeve 1 inch in from the end. So we will move it till it's 1 inch from the end, which is about right there. A little further. There, okay. And then we're going to take our pencil and we're going to mark where these little arrows are. Let me get you a better shot of that. So we're going to make a tick mark on each side of this here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it with FL, which means fin line. That way I don't get these mixed up. And another one here. That's another fin line. Another fin line. And then this one is LL, which stands for either launch lug or lug line. That's where that launch lug tube will be. And it's right between the fins, that way it doesn't get caught up in anything. So now we've got those marked. Now what they're asking you to do is to actually, you can put this in a door frame to get a straight mark on the tube. But they also have a tool, if you don't have a door to use or don't want to use a door. And this is an Estes marking guide. And what this is, a little piece of plastic, or a big piece of plastic I should say, that's made where you can actually put the tube in, keep it straight, and works like a door door hinge area. And you can actually just use the straight part here to make your line, and it's made for different size tubes, which is kind of neat. So what we'll do is we'll take it, set it down on something flat, and we'll line up those lines on one of them, and we'll just make a draw with the pencil all the way down, roll it to the next one. And if your tick marks aren't lining up very well, try putting the thin alignment guide back on, straighten it out, and get those straight, because they should be really straight. Okay, there's the lug line. And I don't like using a real soft pencil for this. I usually use a harder pencil like a 2H. That way it doesn't leave a lot of lead that can show through your paint job, especially if you're doing light color. Even though if you do prime it, it will cover that up. So that made that very easy. So now we've got the lines ready to go on that tube. And we are skipping the fin part. That's the first part of the instruction, sanding the fins, till later when we're ready to do them. So next up is the assembly of the engine mount. Okay, we're ready to do the engine mount, and for this there was one piece that I had missed in the bag, and that was with the couplers. And this is a dummy engine, and this is to make sure you get the engine block correctly spaced. It's painted yellow, that way you don't mistake it for the actual engine mount. So we need to put a marking that's 3/16 from the end. That way it sticks out 3/16, and you can actually just measure with a ruler and make a mark 3/16. I always like to, instead of just making one little tick mark, I like to have a mark that goes all the way around it. So for this I'm going to use this little unit here that's also from Estes, and this is to measure your distance and mark actual markings all the way around the tube. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 3/16 from the length of the tube. So the tube is 3 3/4, so that's going to bring us to 3 9/16, which we've got here. We can just use this little slider. It's nice and tight. We put it where we want. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the tube in here, and then we take a pencil, which we've shaved off to fit in there because it's kind of a tight fit, and we press it up against there. And what we're going to do is we're going to just press the tube, and we're going to, as we're pushing back on that block, we're going to turn it round, which is not easy sometimes with this, but and then we've got our line there, and that's going to make the line all the way around, and that'll make it so no matter what angle you look at this, it's going to be a straight line. Okay, ready to move to the next step. Okay, now we are ready to actually put some glue on the inside the engine mount. Now the engine mount is supposed to have the glue 1 inch on the inside of here, and so again, instead of measuring from one side 1 inch in, we can actually just figure out this is a 4-inch piece. So what we want to do is the 1 inch area where we want the glue on the inside, what I'm going to do is these sticks are what I use to put the glue in the tubes. And these are what they call cuticle sticks. They're available at Sally Beauty, where I get them, any Sally Beauty Supply. And they're just a beveled piece of wood here, but they're real cheap, and you can use them to get in there and spread the glue exactly where you want. But you need to know how far you want to push it in. So we're going to actually put a 1 inch tick mark on this piece here. So we know that that's as far as it's supposed to go in there. Give me a better shot here. Okay, so it's going to basically go up to that line, and then that's where we know we want to put the glue. Don't want to put too much glue, we don't want to put too little glue. Then this is the engine block, and what we're going to do is we're going to insert it from the other side of the engine tube, and we're going to push this, use this to push it in until we get to that line here, which should match the bottom of the engine tube. So I like to use Tite Bond glue. This stuff is awesome. Carpenter's glue will work. It's a little better than Elmer's glue. Dries a little faster, but dries a little stronger too. So we're going to just take, I've just got a little pad of paper here that I put the glue on. So we're going to take this stick and we're going to go into the 1-inch mark, and we're going to start smearing the glue in there. Don't have to be real accurate, just as long as you get enough glue in there, because we're going to reinforce it a little bit later. I'll show you how to do that. But this is just, the measurement is just so you don't put the glue in the wrong place and it doesn't glue it at all, or glues it too much and you can't push the piece through. Now that's one thing about using this glue. You don't want to use a tiny bit, because when you try to push pieces through it, they'll stick real fast and you won't be able to push them in. So you want to use enough glue that the glue works as a lubricant, so you can still get in there and push the piece through. Because like I said, if it's too little, it'll just get stuck before you can complete the process. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this engine block in here carefully to get it straight, and use this to push it through, and we're going to go down to that line that we made using that tool, and you can feel it start to hit the glue and get kind of sticky. And I get it to the point, and what I like to do is I like to turn it so it lets go, and then that way it doesn't glue itself to the engine tube. You can double check it here. Okay, so we've got it in there. Now what we can do is, since there's a little bit of glue left over, we can actually use that and make a fillet. That way the engine is in there real good with a lot of strength. And we'll do the same on the inside, just so the engine, put the engine in there, it doesn't get stuck. So, okay. Should be pretty smooth in there after pushing it through, so all the glue got pushed to the end, and it's going to hold there real good. So we will let that dry and go to the next step. Okay, the next step here is to actually put a couple more marks on the outside of the engine tube. Make sure you take this dummy engine mount and set it aside. Make sure you don't accidentally use it for anything else, but keep it just in case you need it for another rocket or project. So we're going to mark these. You got 3 7/8, 3.5, 1 inch, and 1/4 inch. So we're going to use our tool to make those marks and get ready to cut a slit. Okay, I've got the markings on the tube using that Estes tool, but I always go by the rule, measure twice, cut once. So what we're going to do is we're going to verify that those are the right measurements. So we've got 1/4 inch on the first mark, which it is. 1 inch on the second mark, which it is. Now the other thing I did was I put an F for front, so that way I know I don't put the wrong marking on the wrong side. And then the next one is 3.5. So it looks like 3.5, and then the other one is 3 7/8, which is 3 7/8 right there. So we verified that we got that correct. Now what we have to do is at the 3.5 mark, which is the second mark, let's double check, 3.5, yep, that's the second mark. What we're going to do is we're going to actually cut a slot in the tube for the engine hook. But before I do that, now one of the things that, it's kind of hard to get this wrong, but if you do, it can really mess things up trying to fit your engine. What I like to do is try to keep this engine hook as straight as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my other tool back here again and show you what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to actually just mark a line, a straight line on this tube here, just so I have a guide for my engine hook. So there we go. Okay, so now we've got a line going this way, and we're ready to put in the engine hook. What I'm going to do is I need to cut a small slit, an 1/8 inch slit at that 3.5 inch mark, which is basically that cross reference right there. So, and like so, and then we're going to be ready to put on the ring that retains that here fairly soon. Alright, so again, that's got to dry a little bit longer, so we'll let that dry for a minute. Okay, that glue there is pretty well dry. It's not going to move anywhere, so we can move on. So we're going to put our hook in. Now the engine hook should be pretty much against that ring. You can kind of see it there. It's right up against that ring, so that way if it gets pushed, it will stop at that ring. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put this engine retainer, or the hook retainer ring, engine hook retainer ring, I'll get that right, on here, and we're going to slide it down over this to this mark here, which is at the 1 inch mark. So again, we're going to have to move pretty quickly with gluing it. Again, put enough glue to make sure that it slides enough. Get this glue to open. This glue dries pretty fast, especially in the temperatures I'm at here. That's why you hear that whirring. That's my fan system to keep from getting overheated at 117 degrees. So we're going to take the stick and we're going to just put some glue around, a little bit away from that line, and all the way around. That way it gets a good seal. Okay, I'm going to take this ring and make sure that there's no pieces of this tube flaring out, otherwise it can get stuck. We're going to make sure our hook is lined up, make sure to get this on the tube, and then we're going to push it pretty quick so we get it in the right position. There we go. Kind of was a mess doing that. It was a little too slick. Then we're just going to clean up the glue, their fingers, just so it doesn't get in the way of anything else. Okay, and then that's like I said, doing the ring around it with the pencil line. You can see all the way around to make sure that that ring here is actually not crooked, and then we can double check the hook underneath. Just a slight bit off, so we'll move it over. Okay, now we're centered. Right there is center. So we're going to let that dry now that everything's centered, and be ready to put on the next item. Alrighty, as we're building, one of the things I like to do, it's not real necessary on a simple rocket like this, but some of the more complicated ones, what I like to do is when I finish a step, I'll just put a mark through it. That way I know I haven't made a mistake. And if there's something I need to go back to, say if it was this piece here and I want to go back to it, or there was an issue with it, I'll circle it, saying that I haven't done that yet. So, but we've done all these items, so we'll check mark those off. Flip over the instructions and start working on the next item, which is the centering rings. And the centering rings are these guys here, laser cut, makes life a lot easier. So what we're going to do is take our knife and just cut through the little parts where the laser didn't get to, the little keys. cut out the middle ones. You can pop these out with your fingers. I just like using a knife. Makes a cleaner cut instead of tearing it. But if you're a youngster and you're not allowed to use a knife, you can pop these out with your fingers. But it's best to have adult supervision whenever you do something like this. That's why these videos are made for the adults and not for the children, because you should be there as an adult with the children if they need it. So we're going to pop those out. Again, laser cut is a good thing. I always like to keep this just in case I need to cut another centering ring, and I'll keep these, and that way I can get some cardboard and cut some more of them if I need to rebuild my rocket. Okay, now what I'm going to do with these, since they do have a little nib on them, is I'm going to sand off the nib with some rough sandpaper, about a 150 to 280 grit. Not too much, you don't want to flatten them because then the glue won't hold between them and the rocket sidewall. But you want to get them enough that they don't get crooked in the actual rocket. Okay. And I'll do the same for the inside piece here. This is a flexible file or sanding stick, and I'll just get those down just again so they don't get caught and get everything crooked. You don't need much, just enough to get them down. Okay. Now, these rings are slightly different. One of them will have an actual divot in it, and that is to go over the engine hook, and that way the engine hook can actually bend up and down. That way you can actually push it up, slide the engine in, and then it pops back down. It's made of spring steel. So now the first one is going to go on to the end here, and it's going to mount to this first line that we marked a little while ago, which was the 1/4 inch mark. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide it on there. We're going to put a little bit of glue on the area, and then we're going to slide it on and then do some fillets. I'll show you how to do that. So let's get some more glue going. Okay. That same stick, and get your little tighter view here. Okay, so and we're going to actually smooth this fairly smooth because we want to see that line where the ring has to stop, and the glue can obscure that. So if you actually smooth it pretty thin, you can still see that ring. And again, that's one of the reasons to go all the way around. You always have area to view. And we're going to take the ring, doesn't matter which direction, but as long as that notch is where the hook is, and we're going to get it again. Make sure that the engine hook is centered, and we're going to push it to that line. Now these can get warped, and they actually were warped in the package just out of the box. So I'm just going to push it here and there, just making sure the whole thing lines up on that line as we go around. Again, that's the good reason to do a line all the way around. If you had just one mark that you marked it on, the other side could be way off, and then your engine will mount crooked in the engine or in the body tube, and then your rocket will fly crooked. So make sure that it's all on all sides up to that line. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put some glue in this ridge here. Try to keep away from that engine hook, because you do want the hook to move up and down, so you don't want to glue that down. So we're going to put some glue around here. and get it down in that crevice, because that's where the strength's going to be. A little more glue out here. Now, you don't want a massive amount of glue. I mean, if you really put a lot in, it can warp this tube, which I found out recently can be a big problem. So, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Q-tip and I'm going to dip it in some water, and then I'm just going to move this around, again staying away from that hook and pushing it into that crevice. That way it gets down in there, and that's how you do a fillet. And then we'll do it on the other side. If you're not sure about the piece being crooked, you can always go back in and give it a little bit of a measurement. Wherever my ruler went, but you can measure it all the way around using your ruler. There it is. So we want to make sure that everywhere it is going to be a 1/2 inch. All right, looks good. Okay, so once we get that on, we can do a fillet on this side as well. So we'll finish the back side fillet and move to the next step.